This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my old pal Evan Grant, out in Surprise, Arizona, trying to figure out his equipment. All kinds of equipment Evan's trying to figure out.
Kevin, I've spent 59 years trying to figure out my equipment.
Yeah, you have.
Doctors just spend the time on that too.
Well, you're gonna get it one of these days. I promise. I promise you will. Evan, how's it going out there? What's the weather like?
Weather's nice. It's last week. I really shouldn't be talking about the weather. You guys are about to have like Delkus was on Twitter the other night, like screaming on Twitter. You know, warning! Arctic vortex. It's like 60 degrees right now. It'll warm up. There's not a cloud in the sky. It's beautiful out here. Last week, the first day of camp, was a little bit windy and a little bit chilly. But I can't complain. The weather's nice.
Go ahead and complain if you want to. I don't mind. Yeah, it's going to be cold here, Evan. I'll go over and drip the pipes for you if you want me to.
Gina's got them all dripped.
She does? Got them dripping? That's great.
Yeah, it's hard. You know, when I leave the house, she's got one less drip.
Ba-dum-bum. Yeah, it's like an old vaudeville show here, isn't it?
Yeah, vaudeville. That's the thing, our young listeners, we're really proud of the young listeners we draw in here on SportsDay Insider. And vaudeville, that's something that really resonates with them.
Well, they need to have their horizons expanded a little bit, you know? The vaudeville was before my time when I was a kid, too, but I knew about it.
Yeah, well, my father still took me to vaudeville shows in Miami Beach.
Wow, they probably had those in Miami Beach, yeah.
Oh, they did. And my father took me to see Jackie Mason when I was like 10, and he's up there like cussing up a storm, and I'm like, Dad, what does this word mean?
Well, now, I will say, now, Jackie Mason was a pretty famous comedian, though, so he was funny even way past vaudeville.
He went through a period where he was not very well
received?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's too bad. Let's move on to people who are well received here. Let's talk about the Rangers here, Evan. So you wrote about watching one of Jacob deGrom's bullpen sessions, and that made me think of one time when I was out there a couple of years ago. Maybe it was last year, the year before last. I can't remember.
It wasn't last year. I can promise you it wasn't last year.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't last year. It was the year before last. And Chris Young was out there with me, and I just marveled at this character. To me, he looks like Air Tube Man. That's pretty much his build, you know. And I watch him put together when he starts to throw, and he throws so hard, and he throws with such great command. And it's like, and of course, he's just never been healthy with the Rangers, but every time he does get to throw, well, he's great. You know, I don't know that I've ever seen anybody quite like him from that standpoint.
No, it's you can use whatever word you want to use. Unicorn, elite. It's just different. And I talked to Nathan Eovaldi, who watches every bullpen that guys have thrown and has pitched with, everybody from Chris Sale to Clayton Kershaw. Talked with Kyle Higashioka, who spent the last 10 years, on a Yankees team with Mariano Rivera and Garrett Cole and the likes of CC Sabathia. And obviously talked to Bochy a little bit. And they all they marvel and they gush about what it's like to watch deGrom throw a bullpen. And listen, it's the first week of spring training, and the most important thing is that he's out there on a mound. But, I thought that the thing that stands out is it looks effortless. It comes out hot, and in the middle of February, like he missed this was the story that Higashioka told me. He missed his first pitch location by about 4 inches, and he yells, "Terrible!" And then the rest of the time, Higashioka didn't move his glove. So Jacob just dials it in. And when I talked to him afterwards, it was, again, I'm trying to. He talks in such a technical way. I'm trying to get my shoulders a little bit even. I'm trying to do this. There are just people that come along once in a generation who are so in tune with their body mechanics. And there's a lot of effort. We all say it looks effortless. There's a lot of effort that goes into all that, and you've got to be a perfectionist. and he is that guy. And that's one of the joys of early spring training. Games don't count. You're just watching guys throw, and it is when you get a chance to watch him from 8-10 feet away to sit there and watch it. It just really is. It's a really enjoyable experience. But I want to say one other thing about bullpens, and I haven't had a chance to write this yet. Kind of the next day, I'm watching Cody Bradford throw, and Cody's not going to throw nearly as hard as Jacob, obviously, and there is a lot more effort in everything. But like, I'm watching Cody Bradford, and here's a guy out there who is so purposeful, right? And this is the other thing that stands out, is how purposeful can you be in these little practice sessions? And he's really direct about what he wants to do, where he wants to move the ball, what his pitch sequencing is. He has got a plan when he goes out there. And I think that also speaks to why, Cody Bradford may not have stuff of a number 2 or a number 1 guy, but I think this is a guy who's going to more than maximize his ceiling, because he does understand what he needs to do, and he has the ability to apply that, and he does.
Well, two opposite ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah.
You're right on those types of approaches. The thing I love about Cody Bradford, watching him, is that he's fearless. He throws his pitches where he wants to throw them. He knows he doesn't have great stuff, and he just throws it. And I have to say, I admire that, and I don't understand why there aren't more pitchers like that. In the Rangers' history, there have been a few guys, like Rick Helling was that kind of guy. He was always fearless, always didn't have great stuff, but he said, "Here's my stuff, hit it if you can."
Helling was fear. I mean, and there are different attributes that make different pitchers great, and it all still comes down to you got to be able to throw strikes. But yes, Rick was fearless in a ballpark that inspired fear and nothing else. And he believed, my players will go make plays for me, and I'm going to throw strikes. Kenny Rogers never gave in. His stubbornness was something that made him a great pitcher. Cody, his not toolbox tool is his dedication to his craft and his workmanlike approach. And you take all of that, and then you've got a guy like deGrom. And I don't want to sell short the effort that Jacob puts into anything, but it just looks so pretty. It's just so pretty to watch when Jacob throws.
Well, and as I was alluding to earlier, you've seen pitchers and they're big guys and great builds, and Jacob is not that. He's goofy looking, he's long and lanky, and you would think, how does this all sync up? It just seems like it would be impossible, because what you would want, and to me, if you're designing a pitcher, is a guy that it's not too long, is going to be a compact delivery, something that's repeatable, all of that, and yet the only thing that has kept him from being a Hall of Famer, he's a 2-time Cy Young Award winner. You have a short list of pitchers who have won the Cy Young twice and who are not in the Hall of Fame. Jacob, at this rate, is not going to make it. He'd have to have put together 4 or 5 years, I think, right now to do that. But it's just a tantalizing thing to watch him and think, what if he did give him 150 innings? What if they get in the postseason and he gets that opportunity where he's been really good? And because he's always good, whenever he's healthy, he's good. Yeah. It's never a question of how he comes back. Well, how's he going to be when he gets back? And every other great pitcher you've ever seen, well, they need a little bit of time here to get going again. And if he's healthy, he's going. Yeah,
he just doesn't throw stinkers.
No,
absolutely, he doesn't throw stinkers. The thing for me with Jacob deGrom, and I do think he's going to be a great test case, because look, he could win another Cy Young, right? And he wins 3 Cy Youngs and could still finish with under 100 wins in his career. And he's going to be a great test case for what's the value on how we measure Hall of Famers down the road. The other part of it is, I don't know how unique his body type is. I can think of some other long and lanky pitchers, but that he generates the power and the command that he does is just the word everybody kept saying from watching him the other day. And listen, Kevin, he's been here 2 years previously, right? And he did throw some bullpens and pitched in some games in 23. But he came to camp, and there were some restrictions because he came to camp with some side soreness, and the Rangers were still getting to know him. Obviously, last year he wasn't throwing. So this year it's like the first real camp where he's just free and able to do what he wants to do. And that's why I think we're spending a lot of time on this first bullpen and what we saw. But it is just an outing or a performance level that inspires awe from his teammates.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. Let's move on down the rotation a little bit, because you also wrote about John Gray, and who is a kind of a fascinating subject. He's a guy who has given them a lot of innings in a rotation that has not done that, or at least the one that's being proposed this year. He is, interesting to me as his potential as a closer, at least from the physical side. He has two great pitches. And when he pitched in the postseason in relief, he was dominant. I think that he turned around the ALCS with his relief work there. It just was tremendous when asked to do that. I don't know that John has the mental makeup for it. You have to be a different type to be a closer. And we've seen that. The Rangers have run out guys who were really not made to be a closer. Jose Leclerc comes to mind. Jonathan Hernandez comes to mind. Guys certainly with the stuff to do it, just not the mental makeup. It's two different things.
Well, and I do think that when you're comparing Leclerc and Jonathan Hernandez, you're talking about guys who didn't have great strike zone command. And I think one thing that stands out for Gray is that he doesn't walk a lot, and that's attractive. But yes, in a very small sample size in the postseason and a couple of times last year when he was in a bullpen role, the fastball played up, the slider played better, even better than it did as a starter. And the fact that he was just facing, a lineup one time as opposed to multiple times and didn't have to turn to a third pitch, and that he could just kind of go out and attack. I think all of that is very attractive. And I think that all the metrics suggest, yes, it might play a little bit better as a reliever. All of that said, starting pitchers are just more valuable than relievers to this point. I'm trying to finish off the Rangers' top 30 prospects, and Emiliano Teodo has pretty much been ranked ahead of Winston Santos. They've been back-to-back with one another, two guys with great arms. But there's more and more conviction that Santos will end up being a starter where Teodo will move to the bullpen. And my argument to people was, then I've got to flip them because the starter is more valuable than the reliever. And so with that in mind, and with the idea that we just talked about Jacob deGrom, he hasn't pitched more than 100 innings since 2019. With Tyler Mahle, who hasn't pitched more than 100 innings in the last 22, 23, 24, he pitched 140 innings in 22, didn't pitch more than 40 innings either of the last 2 years. And with Kumar Rocker, who has pitched under 100 innings, maybe I think as a professional, the Rangers are going to have to meter out some innings for these guys early in the season. They are really going to have to be careful on how they ramp them up to maximize the number of innings they can get out of them, and to maximize the idea that, you're not going to have to shut them down before you get to the postseason. So I think in that regard, the idea that John Gray could come out and give you 6 innings from the start of the year, that's going to be more important than, at this point, the idea of him being a closer. This club has signed or added 9 different relievers with some degree of experience. This offense should be significantly better. There should be more opportunity at the back end of the game for a little bit of trial and error and margin for error. And so I think that's the way the Rangers are looking at things right now. Let's get into the season, and if things evolve and we have a healthy rotation and they all feel like the odds of saying that we're going to have a fully healthy rotation at the start of the year or through the entire year are very slim. But if you get there And if you're still having trouble in the bullpen, then as things evolve, you potentially move John Gray into that role. And I want to throw one other wild card into that mix, just a complete non sequitur. But listen, I think that Mark Church, having added a split finger fastball and with his performance in a fall league and being fully healthy, he's probably not going to break camp with this team. But it wouldn't surprise me if by the second half of this season, he's pitching leverage innings or potentially even the ninth inning for this club. So I think they've got options to explore, and the more the more prominent need is for John in the rotation.
So they've been signing relievers left and right, bringing back, getting the band back together.
It's like a Saturday Night Live reunion show. It's unbelievable.
Well, Joe Barlow, Luke Jackson,
Jesse Chavez.
Jesse Chavez, yeah. There's a bunch of them.
JT Schwaga, not a former Ranger, JT Schwaga, who is also intriguing and might have the best fastball of them all when he's healthy. So those four guys they've added in the last 10 days. They've continued to do work and plumb the bargain bin of available relievers. And I think that there's also something to be said when you look at guys like, in particular, Chavez, and really the link for me is Luke Jackson here, the Rangers' former first-round pick in the 2010 draft. Both those guys have spent the last couple of years, or much of the last couple of years, with Atlanta. I think the Rangers really respect what the Braves have done with pitching. But if you look in particular at Luke Jackson, the last guy to sign, who signed yesterday, here's a guy who had Tommy John surgery in 2022. He had, some injuries and some slow kind of stops and starts as he got back to being healthy. I bring all this up because last year the Rangers signed a guy who had pitched for the Braves, who had Tommy John surgery in 2021, had 2 years of stops and starts and trying to refine his stuff. And what they ended up with was Kirby Yates. And I don't know that I'm going to sit here and say that Luke Jackson is ever going to give them 33 saves or do what Kirby Yates did. But I do think that there are some parallels to the fact that these guys have the same agents, and that the agent basically said to Luke, this is a great place for you to go, a good opportunity for you to really realize what you're trying to do here. I think they've got not just in the ninth inning, Kevin, and we can't just focus on entirely the ninth inning, but I think they've got options for how they want to deploy guys, especially since we just talked about needing guys earlier in games early in the season. They're going to have a lot of options on how they want to go.
Yeah, although it's fine to me early in camp to be doing this, and obviously this is at the start of camp to be doing this. I can remember one spring John Hart bringing in pitchers left and right, but it was at the end, and there was no chance to get people the innings and the work that they needed to get. It was just it was a mess. At some point, they're going to have to be making decisions fairly quickly. I'm not saying like in the next week, but in the next 2 weeks, they're going to have to be making decisions about whether some of these guys are doable or not, because they have to get their work in.
Yeah, and I do think, look, the thing about spring training and that they'll be able to execute is with split squads and B games and minor league games. They'll get innings for these relievers to ramp them up. And when you're talking about relievers, you're talking about you need about 10 innings, and if it's a multi-inning guy, you'd probably like to have him get to a dozen or 13. There are some boxes you want to check off, but I think that with the relievers and not adding them at the end of camp, adding them early, I think they'll be able to all get them sufficient work to be able to make pretty good decisions on where they stand on these guys.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move out now a little bit. Let's pull our camera back a little further here. Alex Bregman, a thorn in the side of Rangers fans, and a thorn in the side of a lot of people in baseball who didn't like what happened in Houston with all that trash can banging and stuff, has signed with the Red Sox 3 years, $120 million. A phenomenal deal for a guy who had an OPS of, I think, 748 last year, $40 million a year. Now, there are a couple of opt-outs in that, and they are going to defer a lot of that money, I believe, into the mid 2030s. He's going to make $20 million, I think, the next couple of years on that contract, but that's the way that's supposed to run. Still a really good player.
For me, the most important thing on all this is like how they calculate the present day value, because that's what goes into CBT threshold or cap money, whatever you want to call it. And I think it comes out to basically 30 million. The average present day value is 30 million a year. So it's essentially a three times 30, three for 90 with Bregman.
But it's a $120 million deal.
Well, no, but I mean the way it's calculated for CBT purposes is that it will be calculated at 3 times 30, because those deferrals get discounted in terms of how they're added onto into present day dollars.
That's what they were doing at the office with me. They were saying, no. See, your salary really is a lot more than it looks like.
Yeah.
And that's
we got a better union than we do.
Yeah. Anyway, he's still a really good player, a dangerous out. He's in that Astros lineup, when he would come up, to me, except for Yordan Alvarez, he's as dangerous as anybody else who was in, even when Kyle Tucker was playing well, because he just doesn't strike out. He's such a smart hitter. He's impossible to get through. So I give him that. And he obviously won a Gold Glove last year for the Red Sox. And now Rafael Devers says, I'm playing third base. He's got a $1 billion contract himself, $331 million he signed. I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago. Rafael Devers is a better hitter than Alex Bregman is at this point. Obviously, he is not even close as a third baseman. This is the kind of thing that the Red Sox have gotten themselves into with a few of their signings over the last year. Trevor Story was not a great signing at shortstop. This is kind of how you can see where things are going wrong with that organization, with some of the decisions that are made. And now they put themselves in a position with their highest paid player, their best hitter, being unhappy, because I can't believe that they would put Alex Bregman at second base, that they've got a prospect there who could play that position, perhaps. And clearly, when Devers is such a subpar defensive third baseman, he has to be the DH.
Yeah, I look. The other part of that is you don't want to have a guy with a $300 million contract as your DH. I think that the Red Sox will let all that work out, and quite frankly, listen. My take on Alex Bregman is he is a really good player. I think he's going to excel in Boston because it's the perfect park with that wall for him as a dead pull hitter to really have some success. And this is a guy who had success with a short left field wall in Houston. All of that said, this conversation is not about Alex Bregman and the Red Sox. This conversation is about Alex Bregman and what are the Houston Astros doing? This is a team that you just mentioned. You mentioned Kyle Tucker. We mentioned Alex Bregman. Those are 2 huge bats and pieces that are now gone from their lineup. They're talking about Jose Altuve now moving to left field. I don't know that I quite get where the Astros are in any of this. And my only takeaway is that with losing the offense that the Astros have lost, it makes the Rangers, I don't want to say a prohibitive favorite in the American League West, but I think it makes them a definitive favorite.
It does. Well, my only point for dragging that out with the Red Sox was that, you don't want to be in a position at any club where you're paying the wrong people, and if they're not, you could make the case that Corey Seager is not a great shortstop, but he's at least a league average shortstop. And so that was okay. And you need to make sure that you've got people who have the best interests of the club. If they're your best players, then they're going to put the interests of the club above yours. But the Red Sox are a mess, and the Astros, in my mind, are becoming a mess. I think they're getting a little arrogant with the idea that, look, we just replace it. We're plug and play here. A guy leaves, we put another guy in. We lost Correa at shortstop. We plugged in a guy who was a rookie of the year.
I don't know that I don't know that it's quite arrogance that I think. I think that the Astros are much in the same way that the Rangers have approached things, or the Astros are approaching the CBT threshold with some degree of trepidation, and that has I think that you get to that point with a group of homegrown players like the Astros did, and they all hit free agency basically, at the same time, and it becomes much more difficult. It becomes much more difficult to manage. I think for Bregman and the Red Sox, what's happening here is I think both sides look at this as a one-year marriage, at least for the time being. He's got the opt-out after this year. I'm sure Scott Boras, if Bregman retains, Scott Boras has told him that there will be better deals out there again for you next year if you go out there and put up a 800 plus OPS this year. And I think the Red Sox feel like if he takes the opt-out after this year, that's just great for them. They'll have Christian Campbell ready to go. Or if they decide to trade, if they were to decide to trade a Campbell or a Meyer or somebody like that, they could potentially then fix whatever else they need to fix at the deadline. So I think the Red Sox look at it from short-term perspective. I think it's a good short-term fit for Bregman, and it allows Scott Boras to basically say he got the guy $40 million a year. It just serves all the narratives that I think everybody would like.
No one wants to hear about this CBT stuff when you're losing a guy like Kyle Tucker, who's 27 years old.
Nobody wants to hear about the CBT stuff, period, Kevin. I mean,
no, they don't. But especially though when you're losing younger players, and it's never a good thing that you're disassembling the team on your own. It's one thing if your great players age out or they get hurt. Well, then those are natural things and in the end of an era or the end of a dynasty, whatever. But when you allow the end of a dynasty because we just don't pay those taxes, no, sorry, don't want to do it. Well, that's malfeasance in ownership in my mind.
So you're saying it's not a good idea to trade 27-year-old, 26-year-old, whatever you want to call them, franchise type players?
Yeah, I'm saying that. We've seen in this market what that's like.
I mean,
it wasn't quite the same reason, which was bad enough. Well, that was the thing in this one. That's what made this one even worse. The Kyle Tucker thing's not even the same orbit with the Luka Doncic thing.
No,
but he is because now look at the so they're going to move Altuve to left field. Look at the rest of the outfield out there. That's not even. These are reserves they're playing out there. If Altuve wasn't playing left field, they'd be playing 3 reserve outfilders. If Jordan Alvarez didn't play left field,
I'm not sure I get what the Astros are doing, and I think for Ranger fans, the takeaway is that look, Seattle has great pitching. It didn't do diddly on offense in the offseason, and you're still going to need to score runs. And quite frankly, the Mariners have had unusually good health in the rotation the last 2 years. They suffer an injury or two, like most teams do. That team's got the ability to implode very quickly. The Astros do look like a team that's kind of aging, and I think we've all kind of predicted this for a while, but it's now come to fruition that, first it was Correa, and then it was then they moved Tucker a year before they needed to move him, and then Bregman got to free agency.
George Springer.
So, they've lost the core of what was their championship window, and I think that they are facing the same reality that most teams do, is eventually you're going to have to either keep pouring money in and be willing to stay above that threshold and pay the taxes that come with it, or you're going to have to reconfigure yourselves and maybe take a year. And the problem, I think, with this is most teams sell it as, we need to take a year to reconfigure ourselves. These are like battleships. It takes a whole lot longer than a year to reposition them.
Yeah, I'm not buying that whole thing about, yes, you're right. I'm buying your statement. That's absolutely the truth. I just think that as fans, it's hard to watch that happen. It's hard to watch these guys disappear. I don't know how, I grew up in Houston, but I'm not an Astros fan, anymore. Those days are long gone. But to watch guys who have been stars on your team,
Agreed,
and one by one picked off. I mean, in this market, you really haven't seen that, right? Of course, it hasn't been a dynasty either. So, but to watch that happen in any other, the Dodgers, obviously they have got a lot more money, and they just keep plugging guys in. The Yankees to that extent do that as well when they're good and when they have been good. there's not a problem there. Houston, the market is not as big as those, and there's not, obviously Jim Crane doesn't have that kind of money, and I think there was always question about that. But
it also comes down to results a little bit too, because I mean, to this point, the Dodgers did let Corey Seager walk away. It's a pretty good player to let walk away, and
yeah, true.
But what they've done is they've been willing to continue to spend, and they've had some fortuitous situations arise in which they've been able to construct contracts the way they do. But yes, I mean, all of that said, I've got to get out of here in a minute. I want to say one thing before we leave. It's just stuck with me for a week. I don't even know if we addressed this last week or not. I cannot get over the fact that at Luka Doncic's Laker debut, Dirk Nowitzki was in the crowd. If anything, I mean, everything that has gone bad for the Mavericks after this trade, from arrests of assistant coaches on, to me, that visual is always going to stand out. The most beloved athlete in DFW basically essentially raised a middle finger to an organization he loves and went and showed his allegiance to Luka.
Well, now Dirk wouldn't give the middle finger to anybody.
As close as Dirk would come to doing that.
No, I was stunned when I saw it. I was at the game that day. I was at the Mavericks game that day against the Kings, and when I saw that he was there, and not only was he there, he tweeted it. It wasn't like he didn't try to sneak in and sneak out. He was letting everybody know, I'm here to be here with my guy. So, yes, on top of everything, in Luka's mind, clearly the deal was, how in the world do you trade this guy? And we're finding out more and more about that as we go along here. And I'll talk about that after you go, because I know you're a very busy man, and David Moore is a very busy man. He couldn't be here. I want the listeners to know that I am the only person on this podcast who cares more about them than my own self-interest.
No, you are the only person on this podcast who has nothing to do. I've got to go get here in 5 minutes.
That's true. I'm just going to go back in here and take a nap after this is over, I think. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do.
So, yeah, I want you to address that. I mean, I've got to go, but I do want you to address that. I just think the visual for that just is stunning and a gut punch for me. And I know that the Mavericks are leaking things left and right about this whole thing, but they just look worse with each step.
Yes, they do. All right, that's going to do it for our Rangers segment of this podcast. Evan's going to leave us now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Mavericks and some other stuff that's going on.
Kevin, this is you just get to muse on your own.
Yeah, I don't get to be interrupted by you guys. I don't have to hear again.
And for us, the benefit is we don't have to listen to you.
Oh, get out of here.
All right, Kevin, I'll see you soon.
Bye, Evan.
Bye, y'all.
All right, now that Evan's gone, we can really set our minds to something here. No interruptions. That would be really nice, wouldn't it? Evan was blown away by the fact that Dirk Nowitzki showed up in L.A. for Luka Doncic's debut there. They have a close relationship for several reasons. One of them is that, good knows good, great knows great. And Dirk was a fan of Luka's and loved the way he played. And I think that says everything about Luka. We have said a lot of stuff about him. I wrote stuff about him. I was, frustrated with Luka's conditioning, with Luka's barking at officials constantly, with the fact that he couldn't always stay on the floor. And these are things that are frustrating. You want greatness to realize its full potential. And certainly Luka's greatness. From the very first time I saw him play, it was obvious, that this is greatness. This is what Jerry West recognized when I called and talked to him about it. He said to me 4 years ago that Luka was going to be better than Dirk. He's going to be the greatest player in franchise history. And he was pointing at, one of the greatest players ever. That's what he saw for Luka, and I certainly respect Jerry West's opinion, maybe above anybody else's. He recognized Kobe Bryant's greatness and traded for his rights. I think for the fact that Dirk did go out there kind of just confirmed every Mavericks fan's worst fears. Because I have to tell you, when I first saw the news of the trade, I couldn't believe it. But there's also a part of me that wanted to think that, well, maybe the Mavericks know something I don't know here. And as time has gone by, what we have seen is that, no, they don't know. And maybe they don't know nearly as much as they think they do. What is becoming clearer with Nico Harrison, the general manager who made that deal. At first, I thought, I characterize him as what I would call a true believer. A true believer is someone who maybe believes in something above and beyond what their own intelligence, their own strength, their own knowledge, their own courage is, because that thing gives them strength. A true believer is a good thing to a point, and there are points where it becomes a problem. And I do think that is what Nico is. He believes in what he believes. He believes that the best players are two-way players, and they are very team-oriented. I don't think anybody would argue with that. Those two things are the best. But it becomes a point where you say, but at what cost do I want to believe in that? At what cost am I giving up a Luka Doncic at 25 for a player soon to be 32 with an injury history of his own? As we said, the return wasn't good enough. Now, Max Christie has been very good for the Mavericks since he's been here. I think that he will soon end up in the starting lineup, replacing Klay Thompson would be my guess, and they will probably bring Klay Thompson off the bench, as they should. Max is a really good defensive player. He's a good two-way player. So they got somebody who's pretty good from that standpoint. The problem is, of course, that he's about to be 26 himself, so I don't want to, shortchange that part of the deal. But there's a 6-year difference here between these two players, two all-star players, and we're not going to see Anthony Davis here anytime soon. I would not be surprised if the Mavericks they'll make the play-in tournament, but it's going to be really difficult for them. When those guys come back, what kind of condition will they be? What kind of shape? We did see what it was like for 3 quarters, but that was when the ball was running through Anthony Davis's hands and not Kyrie Irving's. That was the way to get Anthony Davis into the offense, and it worked really well. I'm not sure that's an ideal thing, though. You can't do that night after night, obviously. So it'll be interesting to see how they put everything together for this year. But I think that the Lakers transition will be much simpler. I saw some people talking about, well, they're not sure that LeBron and Luka could play together. I think that's ridiculous to say that. We saw with the Mavericks that Kyrie Irving and Luka were able to coexist pretty easily and fairly quickly, and they're playing the same position. Luka and LeBron don't play the same position, even though they probably could. Their parts are very good at what they do and putting together what they need to do. That's going to be a pretty great twosome right there. So I think that this is going to be very interesting to see now going forward how the Lakers do with this. Obviously, how the Mavericks do. I think, though, that the gut punch for Mavericks fans, it is still very much present. It is like a death in the family, really. It is one of those things that you wake up to it and you think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. And it never goes away. And this is never going away for Mavericks fans. It doesn't really matter how many championships they win. They're still going to think about think about Luka and what he meant to this franchise and how fun he was. Because, part of that was that, you remember how difficult it was for Mark Cuban to attract a free agent superstar. No one wanted to come here. It was very difficult to do that. They had, we had Dirk, and that was it. And then they drafted Luka, and it was like, look here. Here's a guy, one of the 3 or 4 or 5 best players in the NBA, and he's homegrown. That's different. The Lakers aren't getting a homegrown player, but he's just 25 years old. A mural just went up in LA that showed Luka and Kobe Bryant shaking hands. What does that tell you? That a mural just went up in L.A. Showing those two things. When things like that happen, when people still across the league, when Victor Wembanyama said he still can't believe it, when Kevin Durant called it insane and used that term twice, that shows you the reaction across the league about what the Mavericks have done and what Nico Harrison has done. I do think that it is more with Nico than being a true believer. I think there is very much a part of what he did was that it's his way or the highway. And that's the way apparently he ran things at Nike. And that is the way he's going to run things with the Mavericks. And Luka was not one of his guys. He has made a point of trading for guys who he'd had a long relationship with. And that seems to be very important to him. And I applaud him for wanting to build a culture. I applaud him for wanting to build a team built on defense and selflessness. Those are great things. But there is a point at which you cannot sacrifice greatness for that. There is a point at which you have to say, we're going to have to find a way to work around this. We're going to have to find a way to see if we can make this kid grow up a little bit. And I think that when you talk about defense wins championships and you were just in the NBA Finals the year before, and the biggest problem was you didn't have enough offense to counteract what the Celtics were doing, then I think that sounds a little silly to make that argument. It'd be one thing if they weren't getting there. They made it to the Western Conference Finals twice in the last 3 years with Luka Doncic. So I think that tells you that there is an issue there. How long Nico lasts as the Mavericks GM, I'm not sure. Patrick Dumont sure was on board with it, and that was not something that Mavericks fans wanted to hear either. That was a really tone-deaf argument that Patrick Dumont made to our Brad Townsend about what championship teams are made of, and when he cited several players, including Shaq, who was not exactly committed to conditioning, which was a little problematic to make that argument. But he didn't even use Dirk Nowitzki, the local guy. When Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, said that Mavericks fans should trust this ownership group, this ownership group just got here, and in the short time it has been here, it has traded away maybe the best talent in the franchise's history. Why should fans trust that? It's a real issue going forward here in the league and this market. This team isn't going anywhere. It's not going to Las Vegas. The league is not going to allow the team from the fourth largest media market to go to the 40th largest market. That's just not going to happen. This has been a good market for the NBA as well. The fans have supported these teams. That's not happening. It's none of that. It was merely pretty much the hubris of one man and the support of the owners who are frankly committed to this GM because he was the guy in place and they didn't step in front of that deal. They believed in the chain of command. The one thing we always argued was the problem with Mark Cuban was that he didn't believe in the chain of command and too many times overruled Donnie Nelson. We recall when Donnie wanted to draft Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Mark said no. Think how that would have changed the franchise if that had happened. Of course, the franchise might not have gotten Luka Doncic because of that. They would have been a much better team automatically with his addition. But the one time they have a chain of command and it fails them, which was not a little bit ironic. All right, that's going to do it for the Mavericks talk. We don't really have anything else going on to talk about. The Cowboys have named their coaching staff, and they're meeting today. That's why David is not with us. He's out there talking to all the assistants for Brian Schottenheimer. It's going to be interesting to me to see how that works out. I'm interested to see the way they're building the offensive side of this staff with lots of guys who are offensive line coaches and people who are more maybe committed to the running game. I'm very intrigued by that possibility and what the Cowboys could do with that. I think that is the way for the Cowboys to go. We have seen what they've done when they throw the ball around the lot. They're good at beating bad teams, not so good at beating good teams. I think that what we saw in the league this last year was that if you've got a running game, your chances of winning are much better. I think the Cowboys' chances are much better of winning if they've got a running game. I'm intrigued by the possibilities of what they can do in this draft. There are a lot of offensive linemen available. When David returns in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk some more about, we'll have a better idea of what the Cowboys could be targeting in the draft. We'll talk about the fact that there are a lot of running backs out there. Obviously, Ashton Jeanty from Boise State is pretty much the only first-round talent at running back, but there's a lot of them. I'm on record as saying I wouldn't have a problem if they drafted Jeanty. I'm also on record as saying that if Cam Scatterby was still around in the third round, I'd take him. I think he presents an interesting bundle of things for the Cowboys. So we'll see. We'll be talking about all those things. So stay with us. And my promise that next week there'll be at least two of us on this podcast. I don't know if we can get to three or not, but at least two. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.